These opening words are from the Reverend Andre Moll. All that we share is sacred. As we gather together, may we remember, when you share with me what is most important to you, that is where listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you to shelter, that is where love begins. When we experience the full presence of each other because of our shared humanity, because of our differences, that is where holy gratitude begins. May this space be a table that is not complete until all are welcome. May this table be a space of beauty where together we create a series of miracles and where all that we share is sacred. May it be so. The eyes are going. I see some young people out there, some younger at heart people just feeling extra giddy today. Anyone want to come on up? We can come sit up here. A time for all ages today. Now, yeah, come on up. I know that for some of us, we might be homeschooled. For others, we might go to public school. And for other of us, we might be out of school, but maybe in class in a different way. So we've been doing that for a couple weeks. It's, we started a little earlier in August. I never started before Labor Day in Wisconsin. So I've gotten used to that. I'm wondering if someone would help me open the Wonder Box who hasn't done it in a while or ever. Yes, Sophia. Perfect. Oh my God. Hey, thank you, Sophia. Excellent. What is the apple symbolic of? Not in the biblical sense, but in the beginning of the school year sense? Yeah, the teacher. You ever give an apple to a teacher? I think it's an old school thing. Maybe it used to be a really, I look at it as just early bribing. It always felt a little like, it always felt a little bit like, oh, here you go. You must be hungry because you're underpaid. And that's not good. We need to pay our teachers better. But the apple is often a sign also just of our appreciation for teachers. How many of you have a new teacher this year? Anyone have a new teacher? Oh, and how many of you are with the same parent that you had last year? All right, yes. And how many of you are learning from new people every day? You find new people that you have something to learn from? Okay. Now, I wonder what some of your teachers' names are. We will bleep them out. Yeah. Ms. Powell. Okay. Anyone? What do you got? Okay. Ms. Fosbeck. Okay. You probably have a lot of teachers. Okay. Middle school, rocking it. How many of you out there just have a favorite teacher that you grew up with that you always think about at the beginning of the school year? Yeah. Mr. Guthrie. Yeah. Do you have one? Aaron? Okay. Jan? No. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah. Mr. Palmer. Yeah. Rob Farron? Farrow. Good. Don't. Anyone else? Cynthia? Mrs. Oh, excellent. Miss Clove, fourth grade teacher. Any other favorites? Yeah. Mr. Green. Oh. Maybe we should try that here. So sometimes substitute teachers are like that bonus gift, it's like, and it could be someone who lets you watch movies or also just gives a different teaching style. Any other names that you want to evoke this morning? Yeah. Mrs. Thomas. Okay. One of my favorites was two of them, Mr. Reber, who was my calculus teacher, and Mr. Barry, who was my 6th grade math teacher, who also was out, and it was pretty evident in my public arts school. And that was a really important role model for many students in middle school. So teachers can be super inspiring, super important. Now, how many of you have volunteered here for our children or youth programs? You can raise your hand, even if it was just one single time. Oh, and so many times you all could say all of their names too. How many of you plan to volunteer sometime this year with our children or youth? Good, I like that. How many of you are willing to be persuaded with the right amount of apples? Okay, excellent. Excellent. You know, it's really important we think about how we nourish our children with this progressive education of compassion and love and listening. It's not something that just grows on trees. It grows in all your homes, but it also grows here in this community. And so it's important when asked, would you like to help support the learning of our young people? You think about it less of, well, I'm not a teacher, or I was a teacher, been there, done that, and instead say, what learning are they hungry for that perhaps I'm the one who can help them achieve it? And what might I learn as well? Because from teaching and learning, it's a cyclical process, right? Sometimes we learn the best from our younger people in the congregation. So we will cut this up into 6/45 at a coffee hour, and we'll sing our kids and youth out to their classes today.
This morning's reflection was written by Leslie Reuter. Please hear her voice as I read. So, I have a confession to make. I am terrible at math. I mean, really terrible. Even basic addition and subtraction are beyond me, and I couldn't do long division or even long multiplication if my life depended on it. This is particularly disturbing because my father is an engineer and my husband is a chemist, two fields that are obviously heavy on math. I do not know how I would have survived if I didn't live in the age of calculators. The calculator app is front and center on the homepage of my phone. But you don't need to be a math or science genius to understand that numbers matter. Numbers of people, numbers of votes, numbers of dollars. It all matters. Numbers can make a real difference in people's lives for better or for worse. And we can use our numbers to make a difference for the better. While every single voice matters, community is the great multiplier. When we join together, we do not just add one voice to another. The impact multiplies so that the whole is much greater than its parts. In community, we create magic together, something that really can't be explained purely by math or science. But we must always be aware that there are many forces that seek to divide us. And often that division comes from within our own group. Too often we do not stand together because we do not agree perfectly on every point. We would do well to remember that we share a common vision for the future, a common overarching goal, but we might not agree on every least detail, and that is okay. We need to be able to appreciate our differences of opinion and still stand united together. And going back to the concept of multiples, one of my personal mantras is that multiple things can be true at once. I cannot say that enough. I try to remind myself of it as often as I can, though I do still forget. But it is so true. While it would be much easier if there was clearly a right side and a wrong side in every issue, the world we live in is messy and complicated. At the end of the day, it is often necessary to make a decision but that does not mean that the other viewpoint contains no merit. I'll say it again. Multiple things can be true at once. So, as we move into the fall election season, with many important issues roiling our country and world, let us remember that we are all part of the equation. Each of us matters. And when we can put aside our differences and work together for a greater goal, a common vision of the future that moves us forward instead of backward, we have the power to make an exponential difference in the world.
The first reading today is by Mark Nepo, called Spiritual Physics. The prophet Zarathustra, whose name means undiluted star, said that gravity is the irrefutable force of love that binds us together. And the Chinese sage Mencius said that our impulse to drop everything to save a child from falling into a well, this holds everything together. And the rabbis of Eastern Europe rang their bells at dawn like spiritual roosters, barking that God is dormant until you are in relationship. They would chant, "Get up and make God visible." Isn't this how we complete each other? When I walk our dog, I wave to the mailman driving from house to house, though I don't know his name. At the register in the supermarket, I have the same small exchange with Betty about her arthritis every time I buy milk and bread. And when I board the plane, I have the same brief intimacy with Darren, the gate agent. He has 2 grown kids, one who won't speak to him. And there was the old man wanting to buy 2 peaches, but they were only sold by the bunch, so he left. And I watched the woman behind me run to the produce aisle and then to the parking lot to say, "Here, have them all." These small exchanges make God visible. They hold everything together. They arc us one to the other until the gravity of love binds us. So for God's sake, say hello. Our second reading is titled Grounding by Jess Reynolds. On my worst days, it is gravity I am most grateful for. The way the earth pulls at me from her core, yearns for me, keeps me pressed tightly against her surface. When my own core is hollowed out, when I have no more mass than a leaf dead on the branch, still this is enough for the earth to find me. She reaches for what little I have and says, "Stay." Every meditation I have ever done begins by asking me to ground myself. This is not so much an action as it is inaction, surrender, a voluntary abandonment of my own edges and tidy packaging. Sit with me now. Press the soles of your feet back into the ground you sprang from. Feel the weight of your body and know that it is glorious. You are born of soil and sun, and all the heaviness of the earth is a call to you. The earth is reaching for you. reach back, reach back. When I was around 8 years old, while other kids wanted to be ballerinas or firefighters when they grew up, I had figured out what my career path was going to be. Yes, you guessed it, a math teacher. I wanted to be a math teacher for two reasons. The first was that I absolutely loved math. I was good at it, a natural, you might say. The second was that my mom was a teacher. And while there was no pressure on continuing in the family business of education, her mother was a teacher as well, didn't sound very for-profit. Nonetheless, I loved the idea of creating a learning environment, learning from her as a teacher, and creating a space where children could come to love math as I did. My brother, 6 years and 8 grades, my senior, let me look through his math textbooks and watch him do his calculus homework. I know, talk about a fun Friday night in Milwaukee. It was. I came to see math as a beautiful, even poetic language that had both simplicity and elegance, even when the subject matter grew more complex. Now, I didn't have all this language about math when I was 8. I was 8, but I did love the way it made me feel, especially when I found a clearing on the other side of the unknown. In other words, when I found equilibrium, peace. I remember in college, after I was already on my new path toward becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister, I would tell people who asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, well, I'd always wanted to be a math teacher, and I suppose I'm still going to do that, but instead of a classroom, I'd like to teach in a congregational learning environment, and instead of numbers and letters, I want to learn with humans who, despite tending to be rational in all instances, are blessed, shall we say, by their mysterious and diverse humanness, a set of sacred variables I will never come close to understanding. I'm paraphrasing. And so, said differently, I guess I did become a math teacher after all. And hey, maybe I could be vice president someday. I digress. For the purposes of today, I hope to reclaim math from the clutches of bad press and traumatic middle school years when, let's be honest, the subject matter did not do itself any services. Geometry, am I right? I hope to show that math and its nerdy cousin physics have a lot to offer us as a congregation, not just on this Labor Day weekend, but as we live into our strategic plan, our 5-year strategic plan, which we are calling Imagine 2030. And I want to do this with the reintroduction of our old friend and favorite cookie, Sir Isaac Newton. Fig is his middle name. I looked it up. How many of you love that physicist, cookie, or town in Massachusetts? He was a pretty big deal, the physicist in the 17th century, and before Einstein and Hawking, Curie, and deGrasse Tyson, before special relativity, string theory, thermodynamics, and quantum mechanics, there was this deceivingly simple and rather demure Newtonian physicist that was namely found in what he would call the 3 laws of motion, or we would call it the 3 laws of motion. Now, this sermon title alludes to the heart of these interrelated laws, F equals MA. Now, you're not at school. This is not a test. Remember, we are universalists after all, so no detention, only recess, and perhaps extra dessert at lunch. And with that said, have any of you heard this equation before? F equals MA. Let's break it down. Do any of you know what the F stands for? That's right, force. May the force be with you. And the M, mass, correct. Not like the Catholic mass, but like the weight of something. And finally, the A, acceleration. Yes, as in I have the need for speed. I had to look that one up. F equals, thanks. F equals ma. Force equals mass times acceleration. Okay, now in my mind, this equation is exactly the type of reminder we need as a congregation as we gather on this Labor Day weekend with 4 months left of 2024 and 64 or 65 days till the general election. Let me try to explain why, but by first describing some of the realities of our liberal religious movement, Unitarian Universalism of today and over the past few years. My experience speaking with UU ministers and leaders across the country is that there has been a noticeable, if not fundamental, shift in how our congregations are functioning in 2024 compared to 2019, excuse me. Over a 5-year period, congregational life, leadership, programs, membership, giving, and volunteering have seen a dramatic transformation. This change is correlated with, if not caused in large part by, the COVID-19 pandemic, which left no community unscathed, nor one person on this planet unchanged over the past several years. Truly, it is somewhat incomparable and inexplicable for me to describe the difference of being a minister, your minister, and leading our shared ministry before and since the pandemic. One example I've noticed in myself and others is the residual exhaustion and the preemptive withdrawal from deep engagement in community or relationship in general. Now, this is not to say we are not well rested this morning, or we are or plan to be more involved at UUCCI during this congregational year before us. It is to say that there has been an ongoing lagging impact from this traumatic social isolation and fear of contagion, whether that be from transmissible biological viruses or perhaps more endemic today, the chronic and pendulum swinging of anxiety, hope, and depression that our current political landscape has wrought. I've wondered to myself and to some of you if the fear of infection we once felt so existentially relates to and if the fear of infection we once felt so existentially relates to and reframes the acronym FOMO, or fear of missing out, to something today such as fear of coming in. Now, the point of this walk down memory, or should I say nightmare lane, to a time of tremendous stress, loss, and unthinkable change to our day-to-day lives is to acknowledge that our individual and congregational, let alone societal, functioning has affected three fundamental things. To use our equation of the hour, the events of this past 5 years have affected our force, our mass, and our acceleration at UUCCI. Let's start with mass. Our congregation has deeply changed in its complexion and leadership in the past 5 years. There is still, of course, continuity among our leaders and participants for 57 years as a community. With you sitting here today or watching from online at home, having joined in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way to today. The mass of this congregation has changed in size and density over the decades, but the thread continues, weaving us one generation to the next. With that said, attendance has ebbed and flowed on Sunday mornings over the years and has become harder to predict in this post-pandemic era. Nevertheless, Sunday comes around and here we are again. So we have mass. Acceleration is actually its own equation, which is the change of velocity or speed over change in time. Velocity or activity at a congregation is not indicative of the vitality thereof. We have talked in the past about the impacts of capitalism and white supremacy culture that tells us that more is better, quantity over quality, or regarding speed, we have come to practice the maxim now. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Now, velocity aside, the and time already identified as the change from 2019 to 2024, the variable at hand is acceleration, which may pose this question to us. In response to a once-in-a-lifetime experience, let's hope, of the pandemic or the annual summer season, which naturally slows us down or decelerates the activity of a congregation, what factors or stimuli are needed to re-accelerate our shared ministry for the needs of our community and society in the years to come? Are you still with me? When I think of acceleration in this sense of a congregational setting or in my own personal life, I consider the multifaceted physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and social condition of gravity. We would never stop if it were not for gravity. Isaac Newton reminds us that if it weren't for the force of gravity, a mass would continue to move at a constant speed in a straight line forever. That is a long time. Gravity, though, is a grounding force, and that is not by any means a solely negative reality. Consider the words of our second reading today from Jess Reynolds, who uses they, them pronouns. They offer gratitude for gravity, writing, "On my worst days, it is gravity I'm most grateful for. The way the earth pulls at me from her core, yearns for me, keeps me pressed tightly against her surface. When my own core is hollowed out, when I have no more mass than a leaf dead on the branch, still this is enough for the earth to find me. She reaches for what little I have and says, 'Stay.'" Gravity is like an embrace from our Mother Earth, our shared home, holding us in times of chaos and peace, stopping us from spiraling out of control and into oblivion. During the pandemic, over this summer as well, or in other moments where the deluge of life recedes, we are grateful for the invitation to slow down, to rest, to refresh, and to begin again in love. But like all things, moderation is key. Too much gravity, and well, that embrace can feel more like a boa constrictor, not just holding us down, but holding us back from the fullness of life, for the values, mission, and vision we each and collectively carry along our journeys. Whether it is after a time of quarantine, returning from vacation, or a Monday morning, getting moving again is easier said than done. Labor Day marks for many of us the end of summer, or at least the beginning of the end of summer. Sunday for many of us is the same for preparing to go back to work or to the various commitments and appointments and volunteer opportunities for the week ahead. Getting moving is a question of acceleration. There is an unconscious or conscious, felt or spoken moment or event that is required to get us moving, to accelerate us from one state of being to another. Does that make sense? It is like in a different political era, which feels like a millennia ago, where we might have been asked if we are fired up and ready to go. Well, the reality of this gravitational conundrum is that we need both a spark to get fired up and a readiness to get going. You need both to get moving. And I've been trying to figure out what the key to that spark and movement is, which I know is going to be different for all of us. So as I tend to do, I turn to etymology. Did you know that the words motion and movement share the same etymological root? That might feel intuitive to some of us. It is actually a very old root from the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European language. The word is, probably not saying it right, mu, which means to push away. To push away. And I had to reflect on this for a bit. Motion, movement as something that is in part to push away, to move or set in motion, which is the Latin movere. Is that antithetical Is that antithetical to the work of beloved community to push away? Does that foster continued separation, isolation, and stagnation? Then I found another sibling word that relates to movement and motion, and it shares the moo. It's a word that is one of the central features of the human experience. It's like emotion, just one word, one letter different. Emotion. Now, this reframes, at least for me, the work of pushing away. We teach our children here from the earliest of ages about emotions, but we don't tell them to hold their emotions in, to keep them buried or suppressed, but rather to bring them out, to push them out and share them with wild abandon. Emotions like our service, our generosity, and love are meant to be shared, to push out and away from us, to be received by one another, knowing we will and do receive connection, service, generosity, and love in return. Perhaps it is our emotions that will help our motion. Perhaps our pushing away will spark our fire once more and get us ready to go. You see, I think we are all longing for that spark, that emotion, that emoting of a spirit of love that will open its arms to embrace all as we not only find our way, but lift our heads with renewed optimism for where we are going. I think we're all longing to make a difference, that delta, that change, that difference we hope to make in life. I sometimes summarize that being a minister is helping people to answer two questions. One, does my life make a difference? And two, how can I measure that difference? Yes, and yes, thank your math teachers for that, and your English and political science teachers that gave us language and metaphor too. And while you're at it, your theater and choir teachers that have given us the arts to express wildly some of these deep existential wonderings. And all the teachers, formal and informal, who have helped us define our purpose and work to build a vision for the future. These two questions could be brought together and expressed this way. What force will I be for the people and commitments I hold and for the values that hold me? What force will I be for the people and commitments I hold and for the values that hold me? Or is the force within me? Is the force within me? Will the force be with you? And finally, what force do we hope to be for one another and the world? UU minister, the Reverend Andre Moll, reminds us the locus of our spark that quickens our movement, that unites our mass, that claims our force to be our mission and to realize our vision. The locus of that spark is wherever two or more are gathered. Where you and I, where we meet on Sundays or Wednesdays or any days, when we gather in person or online by phone or for coffee, we gather at the space where force may be felt and our commitment to move is renewed. Reverend Moll writes, when you share with me what is most important to you, that is where listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you to shelter, this is where love begins. Our love begins when we come together, where we fear not coming in, but staying out, going it alone, passive hoping for better days. No, ours is a religion that is active, that is activating, that values labor, not to mention unions and the unity we can embody together in this congregation and with our interfaith partners on this campus and out in society at large. Yes, ours is a religion where we know our lives matter and our life force, separate and together, must be pushed out must emote and move one another and this world forward. Forward. Because when two forces come together, when we lean in, lean on, and embrace, we are sent back out in opposite directions with light in our hearts for the love we know and will make real in the world. May it be so, and amen.